Dear tutor and classmates, my name is Guevara, and for this task, I had the honor to interview two knowledgeable and experienced professors from ICESI University. The first one is Professor Maria Fernanda Puentes. She has a master's in International English Language and Applied Language from Lancaster University. She's currently doing a PhD in Sociolinguistics at Roehampton University. The other one is Professor Hector Biancha, who has a BA in Foreign Languages from Universidad del Valle and a Master's in Teaching English as a Foreign Language from ICESI University. What you will see is not just an interview. It is an academic discussion where there was an exchange of thoughts regarding culture and the process of language teaching and learning. I hope you find it informative.
So we were saying that what I said was that culture belongs to society and language is an element, one of the elements that make up culture. So they're all connected. So if you're learning a language, it's obvious to me that as it is one of the elements that make up culture, you need to know about it. And at the same time, if it belongs to a society, you need to know about this group of people, you need to know about their customs, what they do, why they do it, and language obviously is connected to all that because it's part of it.
I will add that in order for you to learn a language, you need to understand it first, and understand that the culture where that language belongs is key.
Right, but do people actually learn about the culture before they learn the language, or it should go hand in hand?
I would say that
Yeah, because no one actually starts learning about culture before they take an English course, for example.
that's true.
You learn about the culture as you learn about the language because they're connected. I would say they go hand in hand.
But the
sometimes
culture
the curiosity of learning that culture brings about learning the language.
But do people tend to know about the culture first, or do they tend to want to know or learn more about the language than the culture?
Well, maybe not culture as like in general, but a specific
Elements
part of it.
elements of culture,
Exactly.
like music.
Uh-huh.
So again, I would say that it's you're interested in elements of that culture,
That's true.
and one of the elements could be language or could be music, for example. So that tends to be the norm, I guess, what people do. So what we're saying at the end is that the relationship between culture and language learning is a very strong one. You can't have one without the other.
That's true.
Well, you shouldn't have one without the other.
I don't think that you can.
They complement.
Yeah, but I mean, in theory, in practice, do we actually have teachers teaching public schools culture with English, for example?
I mean, because it's quite common for schools to have an English day, and during those English days they have. So, for example, we have teachers that they have this English day, and they have little projects like celebrating the 4th of July or learning about Halloween and customs and stuff like that.
But what she was saying that it's not about like what they do, but why
They do it. That's true.
And that there are different aspects of culture, and that sometimes we tend to focus on holidays, on what happens rather than why did it become part of culture. Where did they originate? Who or why did they come up to be? So we said, I said, if you count from 1 to 3 with your fingers, how do you do it? You see? I mean, 1, 2, 3. Whether in England we would go 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
So those are little things that you don't think of them as being part of culture, but that's part of culture. How you do things. We were talking about parking. In Colombia, everyone parks reverse.
Yeah, for safety reasons.
Safety reasons.
But in England they can do it.
We don't. You can park anywhere you want. It doesn't matter. Back or forward doesn't matter. But here, specifically because of the guerrilla, back in the 80s or something like that. So, those are things that you might think, why is everybody so organized? Why do they park exactly the same way? And then you realize that it became a norm. It became part of a cultural habit. is culture. And sometimes those things are difficult for a teacher to transmit if they don't keep themselves up to date with what's going on with that culture,
Exactly.
or they haven't lived that culture.
Or if they just use what the textbook gives.
Exactly.
And that's why it's important for teachers to keep up to date.
Yeah.
Well, we already discussed and we already said that, I mean, that culture, that language is part of culture, yeah? And I think that we can have both of them separately. So the influence is that, like, that connection. Well, I don't know, what do you think?
Well, I think that the influence is a positive and enriching one.
Oh, okay, talking about teaching, like teaching culture in class. What kind of influence will have in now in learning?
I think
In a
that
foreign language
yeah, because you
process.
cannot have that learning without that teaching.
Ah, okay. I
So-
understand the question now. Is what is the influence of teaching culture?
Of culture in a foreign language process. Learning process.
So you can't have learning
Without
without
the
teaching.
teaching part.
That's what we said before. Yeah. So
Uh-huh.
you can have that learning process without that teaching part. So the influence, if it's the right, I mean, if the input that students are getting from the teachers who are updated, up to date with what they know about culture, and they realize that culture is not just talking about the 4th of July,
Yes.
but why and how things are done, it can definitely be a very enriching and positive experience for students, because it will, this is what Diana said, it will increase that curiosity to know more about it, to know more about either the culture or the language,
Okay.
and it will
Like
obviously,
they would understand the meaning better.
yeah.
So what you're saying is that as long as teachers are well prepared, it will be a positive influence.
Definitely,
Yeah.
and as long as they raise awareness of the importance
Of knowing about the
of
culture.
knowing about the culture, students can go and try to find out through whatever they're interested in, like we said, maybe music or something else.
I agree with that. I think that if students are aware of culture, I think that that will be a really positive influence in
And,
that process.
and not limiting culture to just what the textbook says
Okay.
about, what do we say, celebrations or something
That's
like that,
true.
but to go beyond that.
Because that's always the, I mean,
That's
there's
the
some,
focus of textbooks.
exactly.
So I
That's
think
what
the
you always
teacher
found.
needs to be a bit more creative
Mm-hmm.
and to raise that desire for the student to try to find out more about it. So in that learning process, the culture can definitely enrich that and make it more interesting and create more curiosity and
That has to do with the fact that most teachers don't really know what culture is. So they can only relate culture to that kind of activities. So like being aware of what culture really is also very important in a process like that.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay. What do you consider are the most important elements to succeed in the second language learning process?
Well, I think that depends on the kind of context you're in, because there are different factors which are key and important within that.
and important. What are the most important elements in language learning?
To succeed.
To succeed.
Well, we could be talking about factors, like for example motivation.
Mhm. Or personal things such as self-discipline,
Okay,
perseverance,
okay.
commitment. For example, if from a personal level, I would say that sometimes people say it's the teacher. If the teacher is not very good, then I can't learn because the teacher doesn't know what she's teaching. Obviously,
That's
the
true.
teacher plays a very important role there.
Mhm.
So an influential factor, an important factor, it's on the element is the teaching part.
Of course.
It's important. Having said that, what is the point of having a good teacher if the student
Doesn't care.
doesn't care about his learning process?
Mhm.
So, and I know that you can say also, yeah, but maybe he doesn't care because he doesn't have the facilities.
That's true.
He doesn't have the motivation.
So, but it's like, okay, you don't have the physical facilities, you don't have a tape recorder, you don't have internet, you don't have a notebook, you can only afford photocopies, blah, okay, all of that's there. However, I think that if you are committed, self-disciplined, and what was the other thing I said? I said 3 things. Committed, self-discipline, and you have perseverance, regardless of all of the others, you can succeed. I would say that they're all important, but it depends how you look at them. Important within the teaching, important within the learning process, or important from within.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that if it's not from within, their chances of succeeding are obviously.
How can that be achieved in a elementary classroom, like for example with kids and children? Like,
But that would be, children are different, aren't they?
Yes.
The ability and the facility that they have to do things and to learn things is obviously, they observe
It's more
things.
about having fun for them.
And they observe things in a more natural way without being aware of
so for example, in
things.
that context, we will say that the most important factor, the key factor, would be exposition to the language.
Yeah, being exposed at a certain age with children, with an adult, it's different.
It's different, okay.
So I guess that we have to consider that then age is an important factor in
It
how you
is.
succeed. But even if I still think that it has to come from within. I mean, think about your fundamentos psicosociales del aprendizaje del inglés. What did I teach you there? What were the influential factors in the learning process?
No, there are plenty of
Plenty.
them.
There are two.
Yeah, that's what I said. That I
It
think
has
that
to do with
it
context.
has to do with the context.
Because obviously that the importance or the important elements in succeeding when you go to bilingual school in Ciudad Jardín are obviously going to be totally different from the kids in Agua Blanca, from a public school. So, but one thing that they can both have
Okay.
is the part from within.
Yeah, that's true.
The commitment, their discipline and perseverance. Maybe they won't succeed at the same level, but within
But
their
they will be
context they
able to
will be
achieve
achieve something.
Okay.
So I think that's quite important, that own
What comes
intrinsic
from you.
motivation.
I agree. Also the teaching part,
Yes.
like it also plays a key factor there.
So, yeah, definitely.
Okay. Do you agree with the following phrase? Our interaction with the following statement, sorry. Our interaction with the physical world affects our construction of meaning.
Yeah, of course it does.
You saw a module with Profetito.
Yeah,
Expand
exactly.
that.
Well, for example, when it comes to, like, when you go to, for example, when you go to the States, yes? So people don't speak English A1 level, for example, or B2 level, you see? So, like, there's real interaction right there, okay? And that's construction of meaning. So that's what we always discuss in class, like, we need to get our students to actually create meaning within the class, because that's what language is about, you see?
How can they create meaning within the class?
Well, you can give them situations, for example. It's not always going to be the same, but you can actually get your students to create meaning when they engage in discussions, when they present information, when they explain themselves what they understood, for example, when they have interaction between them. So there's always the opportunity there to get students to actually do something with language, that in this case will be meaning and sense generation, as President Nelson called it.
Very true. And there is always a proximity that we can find for them to use the language within a real context. If they don't use it within real situations, within the classroom where they're explaining something, where they're discussing something, then obviously for them they won't be able to connect to the language in any way. They won't be able to find any meaning for the use. So you need to create a need where they need to resolve or find some way of communicating something. And when you communicate something, you're giving meaning to language and using it in a real context. I would say something like
No, I agree with that. That's true. I think that's like the big problem that most teachers or English teachers or language teachers have. Like they don't realize what language is used for.
And
It's
they
not
don't
contextualized.
I was going to say it's not contextualized. Once you contextualize it, it begins to have significance. Otherwise, if you teach, that's why we always say you can't teach the colors alone, yellow, pink, orange, because you're never going to go out in the street and say yellow, pink, orange. You need to contextualize it. When do I use colors? Well, when I'm going to buy my contact lenses. Okay, maybe not contact lenses. When I'm going to buy my underwear, my clothes, I don't know. So that's where you have to, create things in a way that makes sense for them. And that seems natural,
That's true.
basically.
And do you think that there is such a thing as cultural contamination when someone is learning a dominant language like English?
This is fantastic. Because, actually, my proposal, I talk about this. And I would say that the role that English plays at the moment in a so-called globalized world, it has been argued by many that English is the key to success, that English is a basic tool together with technology to succeed, that being part of a globalized world, we need to have bilingual countries with bilingual citizens and global citizens. And it's assumed that if you speak English, you are going to have more chances of succeeding work-wise. But it's all been assumed. Green, 2000-something, says that it has been proven, it was proved that you can get a higher salary if you speak English. But those people who speak English belong to a specific social class. So speaking English is not what got them a higher salary on its own. It's their social class that got them in that position where speaking English was an advantage, was an extra. So if you believe in the assumed benefits of English, and you are like the many countries and governments that have introduced national bilingual programs to improve the quality of their citizens and job life and job opportunities, you can say that English is good and is doing good for a globalized world, and that it brings benefits, assumed benefits, and that it brings cultural capital and symbolic capital and so on. But then there are those, especially those people from colonized countries, like in India, Sri Lanka, and other places, where they say that English is there as an imposition, that English, and they would over-exaggerate, I think, and overreact a little bit, that English is taking over cultures and languages, and people are basically, and that teaching English, the imposition of English, it's taking away values and is making way for certain languages to disappear, and it belongs only to the dominating classes, okay, which is basically reducing the possibilities of success for anyone who doesn't speak English. In places like Korea and Japan, for example, people are going abroad to learn English because English is the way to succeed. But in places like Africa, for example, where parents are sending their children to schools that are supposed to be bilingual from the age, 4, and they are being taught in English at such an early age, but they don't really even speak their own language properly yet. So having to learn English at that age, it's very confusing for them. And they have found out that they're very confused. They don't learn either of their languages correctly. And many of the students who find it difficult to speak in English are not expressing themselves or developing their abilities properly. But parents are forcing their kids and are making huge sacrifices to send to those schools because English is supposed to be the dominant language. And many people argue that, well, what they're doing is they're not really gaining a good enough level of English, and they're not being able to learn their own native language properly either. So what it's doing is basically pushing away a native language, but English is not being good enough for anything anyway.
Okay.
And the children are being confused, and they're not being able to express or develop their skills well enough. People in places like Iran, they say that their culture is being put second next to English because teachers are being forced to teach about a culture that
The
they
4th of July.
about culture that they don't even know themselves, instead of teaching about their own culture, so that
They're losing their
forced
identities.
that they're losing identities. But that comes from mostly countries where they were colonies, or where the British Empire ruled in the past. Where English is actually an official second language.
Okay.
Those arguments come from there specifically. But I don't know in a foreign language context. I wouldn't say that Colombians are losing their identity for learning English.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that. So I guess it's very much the ex-colonies and places like the Caribbean where they feel that their languages, their patois is disappearing or has disappeared, or because of that, and then in that sense, if you impose a language, you're imposing culture.
That's true.
But that only they know, I would say. Those people will leave that. I don't think we here in this, you have the inner circle, the outer circle, and the expanding circle. I don't think that in the expanding circle we're suffering from that. I don't know. Do you think that Colombians feel that way?
Yeah. But I would like to ask you something. Nowadays, one could say that the language English doesn't belong to a specific country, like it doesn't belong to England anymore, it doesn't belong to the United States anymore, because we have so many people that speak the language and who are not native. But for example, when it comes to teaching culture in the classroom, like what kind of culture can we teach them? Because for example, if we take into account countries like India, learning about that language is part of their culture, part of their history, because they used to be an English colony. So I find it kind of confusing for them, like, to say something like that, when I think that the language in their case is kind of part of their own culture, even if they don't want to admit that.
But they speak their own language before English, don't they?
Yeah, that's
They
true.
speak their Hindu. Is it Hindu or Hindi? But I think that it's more like, the Spaniards with Latin Americans.
Okay.
I would say it's more the issue of,
Okay.
well, we want to resist because you colonized us and because you forced us and
But
because
now
you
we're
imposed,
independent.
and then we don't want to speak with a the
Okay.
because and we resent anyone who we don't resent, but and we always remember that they stole the gold and things like that. So I think it's that kind of attitude is like wanting to feel that, okay, you don't dominate us anymore, because language is power, isn't it? And like in some places in Asia, I guess that if you speak English really well and everything, you're expected to be able to join certain positions, certain jobs, to be able to apply for certain jobs, and automatically that puts you up in a specific category in society, which is, I guess, in some ways the same that it's here.
Correct.
So, but then I go back to the same question. I mean, why do you speak English? Because you can afford it, because you went to the UK, because you went to a bilingual school. And why do you afford that while you go to a bilingual school? Because my parents have money, because I belong to a specific social class.
Correct.
So it has nothing to do with English.
I agree.
I have this cultural capital because my parents are doctors, because my parents are lawyers, because I went to a good school, the blah 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 blah. So it's your cultural capital, your symbolic capital, that takes you there, not
Not the language
not the
itself.
language.